Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick with the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about my must-draft middle-round wide receivers for fantasy football in 2021. Inside today's video, I'm going to go in depth on 4 wide receivers, one from round 5, 6, 7, and 8 of your 2021 fantasy football drafts based upon current average draft position and tell you why they are a must-draft running back for that round. But before we get on into the video, I'd like to ask if you do end up enjoying today's video and you are new to the Awesemo Fantasy Football channel, so please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. Not only is it free, me and the other guys at the Awesemo Fantasy Football YouTube channel put out content every single day that you are not going to want to miss, so make sure that you hit that subscribe button down below, as well as if you end up enjoying it, please make sure to hit that like button as well. So without further ado, let's get on into it. We begin in round number 5, and based upon current average draft position, the wide receivers going in this range are Adam Thielen, Diontae Johnson, Chase Claypool, Odell Beckham Jr., Robbie Anderson, and Jerry Jeudy. So my must-draft wide receiver from this range is going to be Diontae Johnson, wide receiver of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Current ADP wide receiver 25 off the board, overall pick 48.7. Now, Diontae Johnson is one of the maybe even the most polarizing player in fantasy football. Either you're with me and you believe that Diontae Johnson is going to be fed targets left and right like last season, and that you believe that Diontae Johnson is going to stop dropping the football and be able to actually hold on to the football and will be putting up huge points in 2021, and that his average draft position is so low for what Diontae Johnson could finish the season as potentially a top 12 wide receiver. Or you're on the other side of the argument that believes that, hey, Nick, with Najee Harris, they're going to run the ball so much more that maybe Juju will have a better season. Maybe Chase Claypool steps up. And if Diontae Johnson can't hold on to the ball, he's going to continue to get benched. And this is going to be a lot like last season. And my argument against this is, even if it is just like last season, you're drafting him right now as the wide receiver 25. In 15 games last year, finishing as the wide receiver 21 in PPR, 22.5 PPR, and the wide receiver number 26 in standard, averaging 14.8 PPR points per game, 11.9 half PPR points per game, and 8.9 standard points per game. Meaning, from points per game perspective, Diontae Johnson was the wide receiver 21 in PPR, 22.5 PPR, tied with about 7,000 other wide receivers, and wide receiver number 31 in standard. Now, why did Diontae Johnson finish so highly last season despite being drafted as a late round flyer at the wide receiver position? It's because of the immense amount of volume that Diontae Johnson was seeing game in and game out. 144 targets on the season, which is 9.6 per game, ranking 6th at the wide receiver position. He also had 88 receptions, 5.9 per game, ranking 13th at wide receiver for 924 receiving yards, 25th at wide receiver, and 7 total touchdowns, 19th at the wide receiver position. Now, obviously, the biggest problem with Diontae Johnson's game last year was the drops, and I'm not going to go ahead and gloss over it. I will talk about it. He had a 61.1% catch rate last season, 79th at wide receiver. That is fucking awful. He had 11 drops, 0.7 per game, ranking 1st at the wide receiver position, and a 7.6% drop rate, 16th at the wide receiver position. And it's not because of the fact that the ball was being thrown poorly his way necessarily, but his target quality rating was only 4.9 according to Player Profiler, ranking 88th at wide receiver. So maybe you could put some of the blame on Big Ben. Now, again, I'm not going to completely do that and completely slander Big Ben, because Big Ben, at this point in his career, he is not, obviously, prime Big Ben or something, but he's also not a shitty quarterback at this point. So I'm pretty confident in Diontae Johnson, because I believe he has worked out the kinks of the fact that he was just dropping the ball left and right. I believe that he's going to be able to hold on to the ball more, and if he's able to hold on to the ball, then he's not going to be getting, sat in these games, not getting benched in these games. And if he's not getting benched, and the Steelers are still throwing the ball at an aggressive rate, which I believe they will have to do because of the fact that the offensive line sucks, so you have to step back and throw the ball. I think they're going to try to run with Najee Harris. I really do believe that. And I do really believe they're going to be able to run the ball more effectively. But Diontae Johnson is the clear wide receiver 1, at least in targets on this team. I'm not saying Diontae Johnson is the most skilled, but I believe he's the best at getting separation. He is going to be the most open wide receiver, which is why Big Ben is going to continue to force feed this guy the ball in the Hall of Fame game, which I know Diontae Johnson played like 7 total fucking snaps in that game, but he didn't drop a single ball. Now, again, That doesn't mean that now he's just going to be having glue on his hands or something, but I do believe he worked that out and he's going to be a lot better in 2021. Now on to round 6 at current average draft position. We got Kenny Golladay, Deebo Samuel, Cortland Sutton, Mike Williams, and Tyler Boyd all going in that range. But before we get on in to my round 6 must-draft wide receiver, I would like to let you guys know that today's show is being brought to you guys by our brand new podcast, Betting You. Who will win the Heisman this year? Can Georgia dethrone Alabama? Which MAC teams should you be putting your money on? These questions and more are answered every single Wednesday with Matt Kajowski and Ben Ross as they talk all things college football betting. We have episodes available now on nearly every single podcast platform, including Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So go ahead and check them out today. But back into it. Again, the round 6 wide receivers at current ADP: Kenny Golladay, Deebo Samuel, Cortland Sutton, Mike Williams, and Tyler Boyd. The wide receiver that is my must-draft candidate in round 6 is Kenny Bones, Kenny Golladay, wide receiver of the New York Giants. ADP wide receiver 30, pick 64.6 down, 6.72 slots on the week. Now, Kenny Golladay is injured. He hurt his hamstring on August 5th, which is about a week ago, reported to miss 2 to 3 weeks, and all reports are pointing towards this is a non-issue. Now, I understand if you as a fantasy player like to be very risk averse in your fantasy drafts, and I agree. In the first few rounds of the draft, the first 4 rounds, I am looking to keep it as safe as possible. I'm not really trying to take some risks for no reasons when I know that those first 4 round picks, they're not necessarily what wins you your league, but if you really mess those up, you can certainly lose your league. Here is when I'm hunting for upside in the 5th, the 6th, the 7th, the 8th round, which we'll be talking about in this video. So Kenny Golladay, to me, even with the hammy injury, he should be perfectly fine for week 1. So please do not panic. That is why his ADP is falling. I believe. I don't know why it would be falling otherwise, because while Kenny Golladay is not in the best situation as the wide receiver of the New York Giants, he is in a situation in which he should be peppered heavily with targets. I mean, why wouldn't he be? Daniel Jones obviously isn't the best quarterback in the NFL. He is far from it. And if he wants to go ahead and try to keep his job, you know what he's going to do? He's going to throw the ball to Kenny Golladay. There is a reason why the Giants backed up the Brinks truck to give Kenny Golladay one of those. They probably gave him one of those huge checks that you see when people win like $1 million on the lottery or something. They have those huge checks. I assume that's what the Giants gave to Kenny Golladay because they gave him everything so that he could be the alpha dog on this team, which is something that Daniel Jones really hasn't had in his career. Last year, Kenny Golladay obviously didn't have the greatest of stats as he only played in 5 games, finishing as wide receiver 102 in PPR, 102 in half PPR, and the wide receiver number 99 in standard, meaning for a points per game perspective, he was the wide receiver 35 in PPR, tied with CeeDee Lamb, 31 in half PPR, and the wide receiver number 24 in standard, averaging 13.2 PPR points per game, 11.2 half PPR points per game, and 9.2 standard points per game. So even when he was healthy, he wasn't really the Kenny Golladay of the past. Because if you look at his stats from 2019, they are really mouth-watering there. They make you salivate. 116 targets on the season, 7.2 per game, ranking 21st at the wide receiver position, 65 receptions, 4.1 per game, ranking 29th at wide receiver, 1,190 receiving yards, 6th at wide receiver, and 11 total touchdowns, number 1 at wide receiver. Now, I understand that it is definitely a humongous downgrade going from Matthew Stafford, who to me is one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL, to going to the New York Giants with Daniel Jones, who again, I have not really shown too much love for because I'm not going to bullshit with you and tell you that I think Daniel Jones is the next Pat Mahomes or something out here. I'm just not going to tell you that. But what I do know is that if Daniel Jones wants to keep his job, which he's going to want to be the starting quarterback in New York, he is going to have to throw the ball and force feed it to Kenny Golladay. I understand that, again, the hurt hamstring is something to worry about, but he should be healthy for week number 1, so there should really be no reason to hesitate with drafting one of the more elite wide receivers in the NFL outside of the top 30, or being wide receiver number 30 off the board. Now on to round number 7. Round number 7 ADP: Michael Gallup, Laviska Shenault, Antonio Brown, DJ Shark, Devonta Smith, and Juju Smith-Schuster. My favorite wide receiver in this range, my must-draft mid-round wide receiver from round number 7, is Devonta Smith, wide receiver of the Philadelphia Eagles, ADP wide receiver number 39 off the board. He also dealt with injury in this offseason, which obviously isn't the greatest thing to hear. An MCL injury on August 2nd, will miss 2 to 3 weeks. Not the greatest, right? ADP wide receiver 39, overall pick 77.2, dropping down 7.01 slots on the week. Now, again, we're in the middle rounds. We're not in the early rounds. I'm willing to take the risk on the injury that is coming with Devonta Smith, on the shot that he is the wide receiver 1 in Philadelphia, which I believe he is going to easily be able to become the wide receiver 1 in targets on this team. Now, I understand being a rookie, being hurt in training camp is basically the worst case scenario because he's not going to have that connection necessarily instantly with Jalen Hurts. But again, we are in round number 7. Devonta Smith will most likely not be in your starting lineup for the beginning of the season. He's most likely going to be a bench piece for your team. So maybe week 1, you play it a little safe, right? You don't just shove Devonta Smith in there week 1. Maybe you just wait and see what happens, because if Devonta Smith can become the guy in Philadelphia, his upside is very high. Now, again, it might take a couple of weeks for it to come to fruition. But what is the competition around Devonta Smith? J.J. Arcega-Whiteside? Jalen Reagor, who has looked good in camp. So maybe Jalen Reagor really is good, and that screws over Devonta Smith. But my opinion is they drafted this guy in the top 10. He is a freak athlete of a wide receiver. Sure, he's built like a fucking skeleton, but at the end of the day, Devonta Smith's college numbers earned him the Heisman last season. It earned him the Heisman. Now again, should you draft a player because they won the Heisman? No. There's a lot of Heisman winners who are not good at all in the NFL. But I, right now, am very much in favor of buying the insane dip at the average draft position that Devonta Smith has had. He was just last week pick 69 off the board. Now he's falling all the way down to pick 77, almost a full round drop off for Devonta Smith because of an injury that he should be fine in just a couple of weeks. He may even get to play in the final preseason game for the Philadelphia Eagles. So I am personally not all that worried with Devonta Smith, and I am really willing to take the upside shot that is presented by Devonta Smith being the wide receiver 1 in this Philadelphia Eagles offense. As a senior in college at Alabama, he played in 12 games, 117 receptions on 147 targets, 1,856 receiving yards, 15.9 per game, ranking very high at the wide receiver position in college, 23 receiving touchdowns, 79.6% catch rate, 34.6% target share. 1/3 of the time, Mr. Mystic Mac Jones let go of the ball. You want to know where it went? Over 1/3 of the time, it went to Devonta Smith. Devonta Smith is a next level talent. So buy into the talent. I understand if you want to be risk averse, then maybe don't draft Devonta Smith. But again, late rounds in the draft, I am looking to get a little bit risque back here. Now into round number 8, the final round of the video. Wide receivers going in this range: Michael Thomas, Will Fuller, Mecole Hardman, Curtis Samuel, Brandin Cooks, Jarvis Landry, Darnell Mooney, and Jalen Waddle. Now, I don't understand who is raising the ADP of Mecole Hardman to the 8th round. To the 8th round. Death, taxes, Mecole Hardman disappointment are the 3 things that are guaranteed in life. This man has disappointed year in and year out, like when you have an erectile dysfunction. That's what drafting Mecole Hardman does to your team. Now, I understand that, oh, Nick, Sammy Watkins is gone, and I understand that Sammy Watkins is gone. I understand. But I don't think Mecole Hardman is really that good. Sure, he's fast as fuck, but I don't understand it. Again, we're not talking about busts in this round, but I just don't get why Mecole Hardman is even in the 8th round. To me, that is crazy. So before we get on in to the 8th round, I would like to let you guys know that we have a brand new YouTube channel for sports betting. If you love what we do on the DFS channel and you love what we do here on the Fantasy Football channel, then you are going to want to hit that subscribe button on our Awesemo odds channel. You can find the link in the description of this video. So go ahead right now and hit that subscribe button, turn the notification bell on, and enjoy what we have in store for sports betting. If you want to check on our other free content we are offering, you can check on our fantasy football rankings in front of the paywall on awesemo.com, fantasy football tab. All of my rankings are on there. All my articles are also on there. And if you want some additional stuff for sports betting, you can check out the Awesemo odds tab for access to our odds shopper and our MLB betting tools, which include our sports betting model and our player prop tool. So make sure you check that out, especially my articles and my rankings that are on there. So let's get back into it. My pick in the 8th round of Michael Thomas, Will Fuller, Mecole Hardman, Curtis Samuel, Brandin Cooks, Jarvis Landry, Darnell Mooney, and Jalen Waddle is Brandin Cooks. Now, Brandin Cooks might be the least appealing wide receiver in the 8th round. He is just the least sexy pick you have ever seen. But I'm telling you guys that this guy has potential to really actually be a top 24 wide receiver. Wide receiver of the Houston Texans, ADP wide receiver 45, overall pick 89.1. Now, I understand there is confusion, I guess as confused as I was to be able to try to say that word, in Houston. Who knows if Deshaun Watson is going to be the quarterback? All signs right now, at least to me, are pointing towards maybe. Maybe because he's in practice, practicing with pads. There is no commissioner exempt list for Deshaun Watson, so I don't know. I don't know if Deshaun Watson plays. And Brandin Cooks genuinely could be a top 24 wide receiver, just like he was last year in 15 games. Wide receiver 17 in PPR, 15.5 PPR, and the wide receiver 16 in standard, averaging 15.5 PPR points per game, 12.8 half PPR points per game, and 10.1 standard points per game. Meaning, from a points per game perspective, Brandin Cooks was the wide receiver 16 in PPR, tied with Mike Evans, 18.5 PPR, and wide receiver 17 in standard, tied with Allen Robinson. Now, if you think back, you would have never assumed that Brandin Cooks was a top 24 wide receiver because he is just a low-key wide receiver. He's never going to go out there and take a defense behind the shed and give them the 1-2 stabberoo. But what he normally does is put up 12, 13, 14, 15 points in these games. He had one boom game last year. Actually, he had two. 39.6 points up against the Tennessee Titans. He cooked Malcolm Butler up, finishes the #1 wide receiver on the week. In Week 5 up against Jacksonville, he cooked up Chris Claybrooks for 30.1 fantasy points, #3 at the wide receiver position. So he's not going to be some guy that is just a boom or bust player. But what he's going to do is provide that safety net to your roster at pick 45. And if Watson plays, if Deshaun Watson is playing, then Brandin Cooks, his ADP is going to shoot up like 50 rounds probably. Now, not 50 rounds, obviously. Maybe it'll go up to like round 5 or something. So right now, draft him at that discount with the confusion. Even if Watson is not the guy, Davis Mills, Tyrod Taylor, he'll still be fine. He's still the #1 target on the team. He's the #1 target on the team going in the 8th round. 119 targets right now, 7.9 per game. Last season in 2020, ranking 18th at the wide receiver position. He had 81 receptions, 5.4 per game, ranking 19th at wide receiver for 1,143 receiving yards, 76.2 per game, ranking 10th at wide receiver for 6 total touchdowns, 24th at wide receiver. Now, I know the situation is a bit murky there with Deshaun Watson, but just believe in the fact that you're getting the #1 target on the team in the 8th round. That in itself should be a reason to draft him. And it's Brandin Cooks, who has been a notoriously good wide receiver. So thank you guys all for watching this video. I hope you did end up enjoying. Please make sure that you check out all of the links inside of the description. Make sure that you hit that like button down below to help boost this video up the algorithm, as well as hitting that subscribe button if you did end up enjoying. Please make sure to follow me on Twitter at NotoriousFNTSY. We'll be back again tomorrow with another heater of a video. I love you guys. Make sure that you stay safe. It's Wednesday, right? Happy Wednesday, baby. I love you guys. Have a great rest of your guys' day. Goodbye.